So it should be no surprise to anybody, especially if you watched my previous video, that I love the Steam Deck. The whole portable nature of it, the whole PC on the go experience that it provides is honestly amazing, and I've already gushed about it before. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do a bit more of a specialized video. I'm gonna have a look at pretty much every Sonic game, with some exceptions here and there, and have a look and see if they basically work on the Steam Deck and you can use it as, like, say, the ultimate Sonic the Hedgehog gaming machine. Now, certain games I'm going to just be skipping out, right? The one or two of them, and most of these are going to be edutainment games that I'm going to be skipping, but for the most part I'm going to cover every major Sonic release. So without any further ado, let's begin. Now, to start things off, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin with the Steam games. And the very first Steam game I want to talk about is, well, the original trilogy of Sonic games. And that will be Sonic Origins, which, honestly, if you want to play Sonic Origins on the Steam Deck, well, you needn't worry at all, because, oh my goodness gracious me, this game runs absolutely flawlessly, so there is absolutely no problems. You can play Sonic 1, CD, 2, and 3, no problems whatsoever through this collection, which is fantastic, if I do say so myself. Yes. Of course, following on from that, you have to try out Sonic CD, the original Steam release that got delisted, and honestly, that also works perfectly on the Steam Deck. However, I will say I did have some weird problems getting into launch for the first time. I had to switch out my version of Proton constantly and reboot the device a couple of times before Sonic CD would actually launch. But after it launched that one time, it runs perfectly, no problems. And then we have the old trusty Sonic Adventure, one of my favorite 3D Sonic games, actually two, at the time of this recording, my favorite 3D Sonic game. We'll see how that goes when Frontiers comes out, which I am covering later in this video, but, you know, editing magic and all that. But yeah, Sonic Adventure 1 works absolutely perfectly out of the box, and on top of that too, you can even mod it. So if you want to install better SADX and have the definitive Sonic Adventure experience, well, you can with no problems whatsoever. And this even extends to Sonic Adventure 2. So Sonic Adventure 2, again, completely moddable, no problem on the Steam Deck, and it runs flawlessly. I have had zero issues playing this game. The next game I'm going to talk about here, though, is Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. This one does work perfectly, however, it doesn't work initially. So, basically, the base launcher that the game uses in order to load up the game, it runs on Java, which, as far as I can tell, has no real support on the Steam Deck, as far as I'm aware. But, after downloading a third-party executable that someone made, well, it works perfectly fine. You just download the executable, boom, go straight into the game, and there we are. You can play our favorite Sonic the Hedgehog 4 as we truly imagined it. What can I say, ladies and gentlemen? And for Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 as well, yeah, it just works absolutely perfectly. It runs no problems, 60 FPS, no problems whatsoever. Now, the next big game to talk about will, of course, be Sonic Generations. Now, this one does work well enough to be playable. However, I have experienced some pretty major performance hiccups, especially in Chemical Plant Zone. That stage just absolutely destroys the frame rate. But it is absolutely playable. What I recommend for this one is locking it to 30 FPS, and then you're going to have a fun time. I've been playing this game quite a bit on my Steam Deck at 30 frames, and yeah, I quite like it. Now for Sonic Lost World, everyone's, well, to be honest, I find Sonic Lost World to be a bit more of an underrated game. I actually quite like this one, but this works absolutely perfectly, no problems whatsoever. You just press play and it goes. It's the easy peasy lemon squeezy. And of course, Sonic Mania, honestly, if this didn't work perfectly, something would be bloody wrong, because Sonic Mania can run on a blade potato. In fact, I'm pretty sure people have ported this game to the Nintendo DS at this point. So yeah, Sonic Mania works fine, you don't have to worry about that either. And also Sonic Forces! Ah yes, that's right, everyone's favourite game starring the very weak villain Infinite. Okay, it's not everybody's favourite game, but honestly, I think this game does get quite a bad rap. I'll still always say, you know, it's a disappointing game. But I'll never call it a terrible game. It's just disappointing. But yeah, Sonic Forces works no problems whatsoever out of the gate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the newest entry in the series, Sonic Frontiers. And I am happy to report this indeed does work on the Steam Deck, which is a bit of a surprise given that it is marked as unsupported. Although I do know why it's marked as unsupported. So when you first launch the game, essentially there is one major problem, which is there is a lot of graphical flickering, I should say, like the lighting doesn't seem to work particularly well out of the box. However, there is a sort of fix which sort of doesn't completely fix, but it alleviates it to the point it's not a problem. And essentially it's a two-step fix. So instead of using the default Proton version, I actually went and used Proton GE41. And on top of that as well, I lowered some of the in-game graphics. Now the game, you're not going to hit 60 FPS with this as far as I can tell. It hovered around the 30 range for me. So I essentially just capped the frame rate for the most part I played. But, you know, I've played it for about 4 hours now on the Steam Deck. I've just 100%ed the first island of the game. And, yeah, it works splendidly, so. Sonic Frontiers, totally playable on the old deck. What can I tell you, ladies and gentlemen? And with those mainline games out of the way on the Steam releases, now we have to move on to the spin-offs. And there's only a handful of spin-off games on Steam, unless you're counting the Mega Drive stuff, which, to be honest, I'm covering a bit later on in a different segment. But Sonic and All-Stars Racing, the original All-Stars Racing, works absolutely perfectly, no problem, 60 FPS. However, the PC version does have a couple of caveats, which this is a problem on Windows as well as the Steam Deck, where the button prompts, it'll only show keyboard button prompts annoyingly. But the game itself is absolutely playable, no problem. And annoyingly, it doesn't have online multiplayer, which, again, that's a PC version issue in general with the game. Its sequel, however, All-Stars Racing Transformed, flawless. Absolutely flawless. Everything works as it is intended. No problems whatsoever there. And honestly, I kind of wish All-Stars Racing Transformed had a larger player base, because I really wish I could play this game online with some people. But there seems to be, like, very rarely I can get into a match online, which is quite sad. And of course, Team Sonic Racing as well, to finish off the trifecta of racing games. Works flawlessly. Absolutely flawlessly. In fact, I'm actually kind of surprised, because this one is marked as unsupported on Steam, and I have no clue why. There's no issues. It works. No problems whatsoever. And this is another underrated game, to be honest. I actually really like this one too. But I digress. Of course, you know, obviously the Steam collection isn't the only PC versions of Sonic games available, so now let's go into this non-Steam PC releases. And to start off with, we're gonna go with a classic, Sonic R. And it works perfectly. However, you have to disable borderless full screen mode if you're using the mod manager for the game, because otherwise it will basically destroy your performance. It will become extremely choppy. But once I disabled the full screen, it worked flawlessly, no problems, and to be honest, it's probably, without a doubt, the definitive way to play Sonic R. I didn't really bother with Sonic 3D. Now, I could have, but to be honest, the PC version of Sonic 3D, I don't like. To be perfectly honest, like, I might as well, I would just say play the Sega Saturn or Mega Drive releases over the PC build, because they're just better. I'll talk about them a bit later on. Now we have Sonic Heroes, and this one is a bit of a tricky one to talk about because I've never liked the PC version of Sonic Heroes all that much because I've always had issues with the physics, I've always had issues with the collision detection that just does not exist on any of the other versions. Well, maybe the PS2 version it does. But if we're talking about Xbox or GameCube version, you know, they're far superior to the PC release, even after mods, because I just always have problems with this game. And speaking of problems, this game doesn't work out of the box, because the performance in Sonic Heroes is absolutely atrocious. Now, there is a fix, and basically you need to go into the settings on the Steam page, the game properties, and you need to add a command, which I'm going to pop on screen right now, in order to even have it at a playable performance. Once you put this command in though, it will run 60 FPS, no problems. And I have to say, special thanks to this guy here, the link will be in the description, for actually uploading a video that I saw that actually got this command written down, because I would not have been able to figure this out on my own. And then we have Sonic Riders, which works perfectly fine. Absolutely perfectly. There is nothing really to complain about here with Sonic Riders. It runs perfectly smooth at 60 FPS. However, I will say for both Sonic Heroes and Sonic Riders, getting these games set up to use like the mods and just having them in HD was an absolute nightmare. And it's all to do essentially with the reloaded mod manager, which I had to do a lot of the tweaking to get that working, and even now it doesn't work perfectly. So honestly, for Sonic Heroes and Sonic Riders, I would just say probably better to emulate it, because it'll give you a hell of a lot less headaches. That's just my personal opinion. Next up, we have Sonic Colors Ultimate, which, as we all know, isn't on Steam. It is stuck to the chains of the Epic Games Store. And it runs. It definitely runs. However, there are some severe stuttering that occurs on your first playthrough of the game. And I believe this is largely due to shader compilation, and essentially, I think this will be ironed out a little bit when this game does come to Steam. So, honestly, I'll say hold off on playing this on the Epic Store and wait for the Steam release for the time being. But I will also say, with this game too, the speed of your storage device the game is on greatly affects performance, as I found out. So if you're playing this on a slower drive, yeah, the game's gonna run not good. So honestly, yeah, just don't bother with this game, I would personally recommend, until it either officially comes to Steam or just emulate the Wii version, because the Wii version, well, we'll talk about it later, what can I say? Speaking of emulation, now it is time to move on to the emulated games that exist out there. And basically, anything from the Sega Mega Drive, Sega CD32X, all the way up to the Dreamcast, all those Sonic games will work absolutely fine. There are no problems whatsoever. And Game Boy Advance and even the Neo Geo Pocket Color will also work perfectly. So honestly, if you want to play the classics all the way up to the Dreamcast era, or even Game Boy Advance, to be honest, you're sorted. They all work fine. There is no problems whatsoever. Now, when we get to the Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii, I'm gonna say for every GameCube and Wii game, expect some frame drops here and there. Now, there is a fix for this if you install power tools, essentially, which can help iron out the frame rate. But there will be frame drops if you're like me and you don't have the power tools application installed, because, to be honest, I didn't want to bother with that stuff because I'm not sure how it'll affect the stability of my Steam Deck, so I just didn't bother. But there is a workaround for performance if the performance of these aren't up to par to what you expect, so just saying that right there. But to start things off, Sonic Heroes on GameCube, and it works absolutely great. And like I said, you will probably see the occasional frame dip here and there, but honestly, I've had no problems so far. It runs well enough. I can quite happily play on the Steam Deck, no problems. And the same here applies to Sonic Riders on the GameCube. However, I noticed that in Sonic Riders, the frame dips do happen a lot more often. So, you know, for Sonic Riders, you might be better off either using the PC version if you've gone through the trouble of using the god-awful mod launcher, or you might be better off installing power tools to help even out the frame rate a bit. Shadow the Hedgehog as well on GameCube works also fantastically, but there are some frame dips. Now, none of these frame dips do ruin the gameplay, because they are, you know, every now and then, but they are there, you know, they exist. But honestly, Shadow the Hedgehog, no problems. If you want to play Shadow, it works. Now for Sonic Rivals 1 and 2 on the PlayStation Portable. Well, both of these games work absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever. However, I should say that at the time that I'm recording this, there is a current bug in the emulator, PPSSPP, I believe, specifically on Linux systems, where the saving is broken. Now, from what I'm aware, in earlier versions, this wasn't an issue, so chances are this is going to get patched up right away. But just for the time being, just let you know, PSP, Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, they work perfectly, but you won't be able to save the game. Now, moving into the Nintendo Wii. Sonic and the Secret Rings works great, but you will have to do a lot of tweaking to get the controls working properly. Because, well, obviously Sonic and the Secret Rings is 100% motion controlled. So, it's going to be a pain in the ass, I'm not going to lie, to get the controls right. But, if you can get the controls set up to work with a gamepad or controller, or if you hook up the Nintendo Wii, I suppose, it works perfectly fine. And honestly, if you do go through the patience of configuring the controls properly for a gamepad, I actually think it controls better on a controller by a great margin. Like, I can see myself actually going from hating Sonic and the Secret Rings to honestly quite being able to play it, purely because of the improved controls. Again, no, I've never liked the controls in Secret Rings. It's my biggest issue with this entire game. Sonic and the Black Knight is much like Sonic and the Secret Rings, and it works much better when you configure your controls. And that's because, well, there's motion controls there's motion controls in this game. Now, unlike Sonic and the Secret Rings, I don't have so much problems with the Black Knight control scheme on the original console anyway, but in a similar way, the controls are improved if you assign, like, the swinging to buttons and whatnot, because it's just, I don't know, it's just more comfortable, to be honest. Sonic Unleashed on the Nintendo Wii works great. Yep, if you want to get your boosting in, if you want to go, woo! And feeling good, well, yep, you got it. Sonic Unleashed, perfectly fine. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And the same goes for Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. I've had no qualms with this. It seems to work great. Of course, Sonic Colors on the Nintendo Wii. Now, I've already covered Sonic Colors Ultimate earlier in the video, but Sonic Colors on the Wii, it works perfectly, and to tell you the absolute truth, it runs better than Sonic Colors Ultimate. So, out of the two, if you want my honest honest opinion, just play the Wii version of Colors. Ignore Colors Ultimate, just, sweep it under the rug, just play the Wii release. And maybe check out Colors Ultimate when it comes to Steam at a later date, because honestly, yeah, it just works better on the Wii. Now moving into the realm of the Nintendo DS, we have Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood, and yeah, unfortunately I didn't get very far in this one, because it kept crashing on the original tutorial video. Now, I believe there are ways to sort of work around it, like maybe you could download a save file online or something, or just get a different emulator that does work with Sonic Chronicles, if there are any on Linux. I haven't done too much research into this, largely because I've been through the whole process of trying this game to run on emulators before when I was doing my big marathon, and yeah, I don't want to do that again. I remember it being a nightmare to get this game run in the past, and I imagine it's going to be even more annoying on the Steam Deck. So yeah, Sonic Chronicles, just don't bother, doesn't work. You can try maybe to find a way to get it to work, but good luck, is all I'm going to say. Sonic Rush works absolutely perfectly. I have no problems with Sonic Rush, however. It runs bellissimo, which is great because Sonic Rush is such a fantastic time, what can I tell ya? And the same sort of goes for Sonic Rush Adventure. However, for both Rush and Rush Adventure, I will recommend playing them on the Steam Deck itself and not when it's docked. And the big reason for that is the touchscreen controls. Now, you can use a keyboard and mouse, or just a mouse even, I suppose, to manipulate the screen like a touchscreen. Or even use, like, the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 touchpad. But honestly, the ideal way to play these games is in handheld mode, and if you're using this fucking touchpad, this thing, alright, you're gonna get stressed. Like, this thing, it works! Barely. Like, it's not precise, it's a terrible touchpad, so yeah, stick to either a mouse or just have it in handheld mode at all times playing these games, because it's just gonna be a lot better. Or just don't use the special stages in the event of Sonic Rush Original. Sonic Colors on the Nintendo DS, much like Sonic Rush, works absolutely great. There is no problems with it whatsoever. Now moving on to the PlayStation 3, we have Sonic the Fighters, which is an absolute classic arcade fighting game. And through our PCS3, Sonic the Fighters works flawlessly. It works absolutely no problems whatsoever. So, if any of you ever want to play some cheeky Sonic beat-em-up, fighting, kicking the other opponent's ass action, well, you're good to go. You can play as Amy, you can twat people with hammers. It works splendidly. What can I tell you, ladies and gentlemen? And for Sega Superstars Tennis, this also works absolutely fine on the PlayStation 3. I've had no issues with it so far, which actually surprised me because for some reason I can't get this game to run properly on my actual Windows machine. So yeah, that kind of was a surprise to me that this one worked just fine on the Steam Deck. Like Sega Superstars Tennis. You like some tennis? Go for it. And to be honest, it's a pretty underrated game. I don't see people talking about this that much at all, unfortunately. Now for both Sonic Unleashed and Sonic 06, I'm going to be honest here. I didn't bother. I did not even bother because Sonic Unleashed, I know for a fact, doesn't run very well on the PS3 emulator. It just doesn't. And I also know that Sonic 06 has problems as well. I think they work maybe a bit better in Xenia, but the problem with Xenia is Sonic Unleashed on Xenia has crashing problems, and I also had graphical issues with Sonic 06. So, to tell you the truth, for both of these, honestly, I just don't recommend them. Just, you know, don't bother with Unleashed HD or Sonic 06 for the time being, because, well, I mean, you could try them, but I didn't bother for that reason. Of course, now moving into the next thing, which will be the 3DS. Sonic Generations, which works pretty much perfectly, however, it does have some speed up and slow down issues whenever levels slowed up. But it's not a problem whatsoever, and to be honest, for the most part, you won't notice it. All you'll really notice is maybe the audio will sound a bit weird when a level loads. But once you're in-game, yeah, it runs fine. It runs absolutely fine. You can quite easily replace the 3DS version with this. And then we have Sonic Lost World, and it works okay-ish. The problem here I found was it does have some pretty big frame drops all over the place. It seemed to have smoothed out the further into the game I got. But yeah, it wasn't quite as stable as I would have liked. And next up we have Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal, and well, the FMV cutscenes, I hope you like garbled audio because the audio is knackered in them. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, the audio doesn't really work very well. However, once you're in the main game, the gameplay and all the other audio stuff works perfectly. So basically, ignore the cutscenes, the gameplay is fine. And with Fire and Ice, the sequel, it is basically the exact same situation. You load it up, and boom, garbled cutscene, but the gameplay works fine, no problems there. So essentially, if you don't care about the story, or I guess you could just watch the story on YouTube, I suppose, so there's a workaround, essentially. And then now, finally, for the final game to talk about here, we have Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, which works great. To be honest, it might even run better than it does on the Wii U. It certainly feels a lot more stable than I remember. So, yeah. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, if you ever want to play that game. Not really sure why you would, but if you ever want to play that game, it works perfectly fine on the deck. So there we have it. Sonic the Hedgehog on the Valve Steam Deck, and honestly, yeah, it probably is able to be qualified as the ultimate Sonic gaming system. Now, my major problem is obviously a couple of things here and there don't work. A couple of the games I tried aren't up to par, or require a lot of workarounds and tweaks. But for the most part, yeah, everything I've thrown at it seems to work no problem. So, yeah, this device here, I'm pointed because it's currently hooked up because I need to record some more footage. But it works just amazingly. Like, honestly, if you want an all-in-one Sonic game system, this can be your all-in-one Sonic game system. There's only like a handful. In fact, I think it's even less than 5. I didn't count how many didn't work to my satisfaction. So, yeah. That's it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, though, I shall call it here. So thank you all for watching. Hope this gives you a good, look at the games and the performance. And I shall hopefully catch you all again. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you after. Bye!